So multi-factor authentication seems to be, I guess, growing importance as a bit of a buzz topic. Can you give us a little bit of a sort of background as to why that might be and sort of what it involves?
Well, multi-factor, yeah, it's a buzzword now, but it's something that's been around for quite a long time, right? A lot of organisations have been using it, but because of the current pandemic, let's say, there's a lot more remote working. So there's a lot more untrusted individuals coming into the network. So, for example, Phil, you're sitting at home with your family having dinner. Someone knocks at the door, you open the door, it's the gasman, right? Okay, so he says. So you ask him what you're doing, and he said, "Oh, I've come here to fix something." And you're like, "Okay, well, can you show me your ID?" So he shows you his ID. And you're still a bit unsure about, is he really the gasman? Because I've got no appointments booked, right? I'm not expecting anybody to come round. So you ring up the head office. So all of a sudden, you in your own house, because it's your house, you got your family there, you got all your goods there, your whole life is there. You're protecting it as much as you can. So all of a sudden, you've got someone knocking on your door that you're not too sure about. So you're authenticating who they are. You do it once, maybe you do it twice, you might do it 3 times. So what is the difference between you protecting your house and as an individual and an employee protecting your company? So multi-factor authentication, every organization should be implementing it, because you just never know. You need to identify who that individual is, right? So you go through 1 authentication, then you might go through 2, you might go through 3, just to authenticate. Make sure that you know who that individual is and they authenticate who they are. So it's very important, and that was just an example where someone who's not technical can understand it from someone come knocking at your door. Whether it's your house or it's your company, it's the same principle.
Okay, I mean, just a supplementary to that, in terms of what you say, it's been around for a while. So why is it just because security? We read obviously every day in the papers, on the news, somebody's been hacked, somebody's database has been made public. Is it just literally because it's got that much higher on the agenda, so suddenly people want better solutions, or are there any other sort of reasons as to why it's raising its profile?
Sure, there's a number of different reasons. One of them obviously is a lot more people working remotely. A lot more people are more, let's say, traveling around. You've got organisations that have offices all around the world. They're all connecting back into the head office, whether it's a central network. You want to make sure you know who those individuals are, that they're accessing your critical infrastructure. So if that one user has been compromised, so imagine you've got a deck of cards. The deck of cards, you take out the bottom piece, the whole deck falls down, right? You've got your little triangle, it all falls down. Now that's the same principle with organisation. It just takes that one compromised user to bring down an organisation, disrupt what they're doing, whether it's or someone compromises some privileged credentials, takes out you've got ransomware. It just takes that one single user to bring down an organisation. Bring down maybe a bit harsh, but there's a lot of consequences from a compromised user going into the network like that. So MFA is something that organisations are really taking serious now, because they're remote working. With the pandemic, you got staff where they originally worked from the office. Now all of a sudden, imagine you've got 200-300 staff that are working in the office. Now all of a sudden, everybody's working remotely. There's maybe one person in the office. The networks weren't built for everybody in the company to work remotely, which is a massive risk. And just reducing that risk, even by a small amount, by doing multi-factor authentication, is key to security for a lot of organisations.
Okay, and you referenced obviously that our current situation. So clearly, I mean, bring your own device, I guess, created a certain sort of security angle. And then, as you say, now it's not so much bring your own device, but use your own device wherever you happen to be. So am I right to say there's a sort of short-term maybe fix to do with that immediate security issue? And are there longer-term, bearing in mind it appears that this sort of hybrid approach, despite what the government might be telling us or not telling us, depending on which week we're in, but, back to the office, but no, sorry, most people seem to be accepting that, more flexible working, bit at home, bit at the office. So longer term, I guess the question is are there security issues that need to be addressed with that hybrid model?
There most definitely are. If you look at it now, look at the pandemic. So all of a sudden the government's telling us to go back to the office only a couple of weeks ago. Now all of a sudden they're saying, no, you need to work from home. So, organizations are adapting. It's been about 5 months or whatever since the pandemic started. So when it first started, there was a massive push. Nobody come to the office. Then all of a sudden, 5-6 months later, they're saying, okay, actually, some of you can come to the office. But now the government's saying, well, actually, if you can work from home, work from home. So there will be a hybrid at some point. There will be some people coming into the office, but some people won't feel safe. That's for sure, no matter what the government says, right? Because the times can change very drastically, very quickly. Nobody was expecting this pandemic, and the government haven't dealt with something like this so serious for a very long time. Well, they never have, put it that way, right? And neither have we. So it's all new to us. But again, with the security people, when everybody goes hybrid, so some people will work from the office, some people will work from home. What you need to do is implement a principle of least privilege and have an EPM solution, an endpoint privilege management solution. Because when you're working remotely, you've got these people connecting into your network. Now, if that one user is compromised, or let's say they have certain privileges, they can download some software and all of a sudden that software is malicious, then they're connecting into your network, that's going to cause a lot of disruption, a lot of problems. You've got security risk there, and that's just one user. If you've got hundreds of people working remotely, just imagine the consequences. Even 2-3 of them download something that's not supposed to be downloaded. Now, if you implement the principle of least privilege, a bit like Wallix, we have an EPM solution that you can put on all your endpoints. It can actually implement the principle of least privilege by taking away all admin rights. So the users they don't have the ability to download anything that could be potentially malicious. They're only allowed to have the ability to use trusted applications that the company allows, for starters, and they're safe. And if they want to download something, then they have to request that from the organization saying, hey, I need this bit of software, I need to do more work, so hence why I need it on my machine. And they request that, then you can give them just-in-time privileges. So only for that bit of time, so they can download the software, they've got the software, and then those privileges are taken away again. Also, things like our EPM Best Safe solution, we work on the application layer. So not only now they've downloaded the software, we can actually look at what sort of calls, API calls, this bit of software is trying to do. Is it trying to encrypt all of a sudden? Is it encrypting, thousands of files in a second, which is humanly impossible, right? So we know that shouldn't be right. That's something wrong there. So we can block it right at where it's about to start. So on when it makes an API call. So we offer the best safe solution for that type of scenario for BYOD and remote working. It's something that we're getting a massive amount of interest in at the moment, especially considering the amount of remote working that's going on.
And you mentioned the word trust in that answer. I mean, zero trust is, I guess, a related. Again, I suspect for a long time, lots of companies have, in a sense, use that as a sort of way of approaching security. But it does again seem, the phrase zero trust security seems to be gaining. So is that because of the current situation, or was it happening anyway? And I guess, what are the benefits of that kind of approach?
So yeah, I can see from an end user's perspective, when you mention zero trust, all of a sudden they're like, oh, you don't trust me now? I've been working here 20 years all of a sudden. So it brings up the imagination, right, when you're talking about zero trust. But really what zero trust means is there's people outside your organization that we shouldn't trust. And there's potentially people within inside the organization that could be compromised. So we need to implement a zero trust policy, but to protect our organization, but also our own employees, because one of the major security risks and factors are human error, right? I'm an employee, I've been working there 20 years. I don't know how many mistakes I've made, right? I'm always making mistakes, fat fingers, I'm typing something and I've typed something wrong or whatever. We make mistakes. Now that could potentially have an issue with the network, or there could be something that cause a problem. So when we implement a zero trust framework, it's part of NIST, which is a NIST framework. So it's about controlling what people can and can't do on your network at any given time. Also having granular access, or granular control. So if someone is allowed to go and do something, you control to make sure that they don't do anything malicious, or they don't go and click on some folder or file that they're not supposed to, and you may monitor and record what they can do. But also, zero trust is about auditing. You want to make sure you have everything is audited, what they did, what they didn't do, how they did it, did they click on this, did they click on that. So it's a part of something that's a recommendation in regards to this framework, zero trust. But it's also about saying to employees that we're trying to protect you as well, not just, we're trying to protect the company, because you guys are the most important asset. Employees are the most important asset for the company. So we're trying to protect them and the company by implementing a zero trust framework.
Okay, and in terms of yourselves, I mean, I think I'm right in thinking you've fairly recently introduced back to multi-factor authentication solution, but also I think you've got a training program as well, which is a newish sort of concept. So can you just tell us a little bit about, I guess, what the company's up to around this?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you mentioned multi-factor authentication. We've launched a solution called the Authenticator. Now, because our organisation works in privileged access management, identity, and so on, it's something that we get asked a lot for, and it's an area that we work in, i.e., before you go to a PAM solution, you want to be able to have the ability to identify who those users were. So again, we're going back to what the first question, talking about MFA. It's something that we work heavily in. Now, we work with a lot of different vendors, so we integrate with a lot of the big vendors out there that provide MFA. But we have a lot of customers who come to us and say, hey, look, we're looking to upgrade our MFA, or we're looking for alternatives and so on. So it fits into what we're already offering, and it fits nicely into, because you need to identify before you get into access to privileged servers or applications, and that's where the Bastion and PAM solution comes into. So we launched the Authenticator. We get a massive response from that because, it fits into what we do. The other questions in regards to the training, yes. So as an organisation, as a cybersecurity vendor, we've been providing training from day one, but we're always improving on what we're doing, and we've launched the administrator training, Wallix administrator training. Now, because of the pandemic, before the pandemic, let's say we were offering training on site or going to a customer's site, taking our trainers there, training the staff up there. But recently we launched also virtual training, which we're getting a huge response on, because it's so critical for organizations not to just implement a solution, but know how to use it and how to use it correctly. So it's just channel partners and also end users. So they take our training. It gives them the ability to administer the Bastion solutions themselves, but also it shows them the capabilities and the abilities of the actual solution, what it can and can't do, and how to implement certain policies and procedures and best practices. So it's critical. We always recommend training to whether it's end users or channel partners to get a good idea of what PAM is and how our product can help them protect them against certain threats.
And just before we finish, maybe it might be unfair to ask you, but clearly,
don't start.
in the current situation, etc. There is an awful lot of things to consider. Are there one or two pieces of advice that someone is scratching their head thinking, I've got half my workforce at home, they come into the office 2 days, it's a very chaotic picture, I guess is what I'm saying. So are there one or two starting pieces of advice that people have to implement before they can then work towards the right kind of infrastructure solution?
Sure. So what I definitely would recommend is, first and foremost, is training for the staff, right? From top down or bottom up, whichever way you look at it, from the CEO all the way down to whoever's right at the bottom or bottomward up. You have to train your staff to be security aware as an organization. Everybody's a stakeholder. Every single person in that organization is a stakeholder when it comes to security. Remember that we mentioned earlier that, the deck of cards, pull the bottom one, everything goes. So everybody, it can potentially bring down the organization in financial means, IP or whatever. So first and foremost, you need to train your staff in regards to what to look out for. Things like, when I get an email from HMRC every few days. They're not real, right? Really, HMRC are not looking to give me £2,000 back. Very rarely. Exactly. So you need to spot these mistakes. But if you're not working in cybersecurity, even I sometimes look at these emails and they look so real. You're like, I want to click that. I feel so much I want to click that, but you shouldn't, right? You got to, it's human nature. You got to push yourself back and say, actually, I shouldn't click in because that doesn't look real, or I've not applied for any rebate, or why would they be sending me a rebate? Always ring the organisation and first check. Hey, did you send me an email? Is that correct? Second is when you download something. Downloading some sort of file that might have been sent on an email. Hey, look, hey, Kevin, here's a file, have a look at this as a game or whatever. You do not know what that file contains, right? You might think it's just a game, you might be playing a game, but It could be installing malware in the machine, keylogger or ransomware or whatever. So don't ever download anything unless it's from a trusted source that you can collaborate and say, hey, ring them up and say, did you send me your file? Did you send me an email? So that's the first foremost. But then you also, as an organization, you should implement certain policies. Make sure, that everybody's aware of the organization's policies. But then you also need to enforce those policies as well. And that's where technology comes into it, where it's things like privileged access management, endpoint privilege management, multi-factor authentication, and a number of different other technologies that, that are in the technology stack. That's where technology comes in. So you need to follow the first few steps about training, enforcing, and policies and procedures, and then implementing technology. So I would recommend following those 3 steps to get up to speed to a certain level of security.
And just a follow up to that, I guess, employees, what sort of is there an accepted level of action, because you hear some companies, don't allow their employees online, to do anything, like shop at lunchtime or whatever, and others more or less. I'm thinking, obviously, if you ban it all, then they'll just find ways around it, and then you won't necessarily know there's a problem. But obviously, if you enable them to play games all day long, then they're perhaps not working. So I guess, where's the balance? Do you think there is an obvious balance to strike between trusting employees to be responsible and preventing them from doing certain things?
Yeah, most definitely. It's about finding a balance, right? You like you said, you don't want to sort of take away everything, and then they're like, oh, I don't want to go into work. I don't want to work for this company anymore because they don't trust me, and so on. So it's about finding a balance between security and productivity. So, you want to give them some leeway and say, hey, okay, you're allowed to go and do certain things, but within a controlled environment, with a controlled way. So you whitelist certain applications, you blacklist and say, okay, you could do certain things, but you can't do certain things. And things like principle of least privilege. So you want to implement certain policies within the organization when you're starting off. But it's a difficult task for a lot of different organizations. Some are large, some are small, some have a lot of remote staff. So it's finding that balance between productivity and security, because if you do too much security, you don't have any productivity, right? Everybody's like, I can't do anything. And if you have too much productivity, you have very little security. So it's finding that fine balance between organizations, and then they can do principle of least privilege, zero trust, and so on. But those are just some examples that they can implement to help their employees in regards to finding that balance.
That's brilliant. We covered a fair amount of ground there, and I really appreciate your time. So thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Phil.